Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Art of the Game. Today's podcast is one we're really excited to bring you, as this guest is an absolute pioneer in the creative space and someone we've known for a very long time. He's a major reason why our investment and interest peaked in content in the early days of working in sport. He was making inroads and a real impact online. We began our working relationship working together at the NRL about 8 years ago. We saw some really great success in the content we were able to create together. His successes have since taken him on to work with some of the biggest sporting organisations in the world. We'll get him to go into a bit further, but just to drop a few names, the NBA, the NFL, the Bleacher Report, and there's plenty more. We're really keen to delve into this chat with Lee today and unpack his views on how content is shaping the world of sport and how young designers can make the leap from freelance into a full-time gig. So let's get him on the podcast and get him to give himself a little bit of an introduction. So welcome Lee, also known as Shift Refresh, to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Cass. Reese, what an introduction. That's phenomenal. Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Deserved.
Welcome. 8 years, I think. I was having a think about it this morning. I think we've known each other when we started first working together at the NRL. You were our first external freelancer, which is pretty cool.
Yes, 8 years seems to have flown by. I often sort of think back to where it all started. It really doesn't feel that long ago. And I mean, I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity you guys gave me, enabled me to get my foot started in this industry. It's just been a whirlwind since what back then, 2016?
Yeah,
I think 2015 or 2016.
Gosh, that feels like so long ago, but like also yesterday.
Well, yeah, I guess, how we got started together. Like, talk to us about how you got started in design. You obviously had a bit of a web background, so talk to us, give us a bit more of an intro into yourself.
Yeah, so based up here in Townsville, North Queensland, been here since I was a little kid. I studied graphic design at James Cook University here, and that really sort of majored more so in web design, multimedia, and things of that nature. I graduated in 2004 and started working for a local company, literally just making websites for government organizations, local clients, and things like that. And I was enjoying it initially, but after a number of years, it just started to become quite sort of laborious. It was the same kind of cookie cutter stuff. And I found the web design industry as a whole at the time really started to become real sort of boring and template driven. And then when you had these content management systems come on board, that really sort of ramped up that sort of sterile kind of side, I guess you'd call it. And it was around about that time that I was looking for something different. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. But I was also freelancing at this point as well. And so I as a freelancer for a number of years in the web industry, I really was looking for something different. And then it wasn't until sort of the 2014, 15 era, started to notice some people popping up on social media, having success using Photoshop and sort of leveraging that into the sports realm, creating graphics and promos and things like that. So I didn't initially think that's something I could do, but I thought for a bit of fun, I might sort of create up some social media accounts and start posting work along those lines, showing that it's something I'm capable of doing. And really, it started as more of a fun thing on the side, just tagging different sporting organizations, trying to get different people's attention. And then slowly but surely, it started to build from there. So specifically with the NRL, I do recall, I think LinkedIn was probably a good sort of way in for me there. I remember sort of doing my research and seeing who was involved. And I think I remember seeing your name there, Reese. And Matt Henry was another contact with the NRL at the time there. So I think I'm pretty sure I sent you guys like a DM. And from there, I managed to get my first sort of little gig with you guys and sort of snowball from there.
Matty Henry, we miss him.
Oh, what a bloke.
Yeah, I mean, my first memory is coming across your work on Instagram. You're posting, as a Broncos supporter based in Townsville. Still trying to wrap my head around that one, but saw a lot of your work on Instagram, and we sort of had a bit of external budget and didn't really have any internal design resource specific to social, and we were able to reach out and get in touch, and the rest is...
I think we had external budget. I think you had to force that out of the business.
Yeah, we had to force the external budget.
But we found it somewhere on the line.
I remember it being really cool because it was like, hey, we like the work you're doing. Pitch us some ideas. And to me, that was like, oh, Well, I wasn't
That's
expecting
right.
that. I was expecting you just do this and, we'll see what we can do. But to get that creative freedom from the get-go was exciting and also a little bit daunting, to be honest, because it's like, because at that point I'm really trying to prove myself and prove my worth. So it's like, oh crap, I better come up with a good idea here to justify you guys actually showing interest in me. So it was a fun time.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty about working with you. You sort of some briefs that we've seen have been like one or two sentences, but you're able to pick it up and put your own spin on it and come up with your own ideas. So you're not just a graphic designer, you're a digital artist, and you're very good at what you do.
Much appreciated. But yeah, I find that's pretty important with social media, and I've learned over the years just through following others as well, as it's the narrative of the story. It's not just let's present some statistics and make it look pretty, but a lot of the times that what's behind this, what's going on with the player that makes this particular stat significant and things like that, and how can you come up with an entertaining sort of angle on that or a slant to create content that's a little bit more interesting.
I think that's probably a good lead into some of the stuff that we're dealing with some of the younger kind of up and coming designers. I guess they've been born into a world where sporting graphics and your social media and digital advertising and stuff is just part of their life. So I guess we sometimes struggle, I think, in trying to get across the fact that there is got to be a story behind what you're trying to say in digital space. There's got to be a bit more thought, a bit more of a creative process around pulling these sporting pieces together, as opposed to just finding something you like and copying it and putting a new player in and changing the stat. And it still looks good, it still looks great, but there is a whole lot more to the creative process than just finding something that looks good and copying it. So I think that's just definitely something that we want you to touch on and just kind of harp on the fact that there is certain elements that need to go into designing a good piece of sports creative. So what is your process, I guess, on that end, and how do you kind of take a brief or take a sentence from Reese or I and go through that like early initial planning and to figuring out what the output's going to look like? But yeah, what's the process of getting there, and what would be your advice to kind of young designers that are wanting to break into the market to try and make themselves a little bit different rather than just a cookie cutter approach to good graphics?
A lot of that comes down for me personally is how can I create a piece of content that's going to entertain myself? If I picture myself sitting, scrolling through mindlessly and seeing all the standard stuff, what's going to be something that might jump out and grab someone's attention that isn't what they're expecting? And so that can be something that's, might be a bit quirky or plays on the personality of the player. But that's generally where I sort of start from. And a lot of the times, the client themselves will have an idea of what that is, because a lot of the times I might be working with a new client or even in a new sport that I honestly don't know a great deal about. The AFL is sort of an example of that. I've done some work recently for the Geelong Cats, and I've had a fantastic time, having fun, but really based on their guidance of, hey, look, this character, this person is known for this. He's a bit of a larrikin. Try this particular element with it. And so I'm coming at that blind, not knowing anything about it. But in some ways I can apply like sort of a fresh approach based on what they're telling me to come up with something cool there. So I don't know if there's a be all and end all way about going about it, but a lot of it really has just come down to being doing it for a number of years now and sort of seeing what works and what doesn't, and what might be something new, what might be something we can take a chance with, that can connect with people. And I'm sure, as you guys know, it's an elusive beast sometimes, that something that you'd almost bet money that this is going to pop off on social media, this is going to do really well, and it just falls flat on its face. And conversely, something that you probably didn't really put too much thought into, but thought this might go, we'll get it out there as a piece of content, and it blows up out of nowhere. So I guess that's why it's a challenge trying to come up with answers to these things. It can be quite all over the shop sometimes, but that's sort of where I'm at with that in regards to that element.
Yeah, I think we're going to touch on it a bit later on, but it might just be good to go through it now. But I think when we were kind of chatting about what's unique about you and your designs and things like that, I'll let Reese touch on it a bit further, but we were saying that, you have a really good knack of being able to create, show your versatility and your breadth in what you can create from a content point of view. But there's always that one little thing that kind of draws us to be like, oh, that must be like a shift refresh piece, or that's something that you've created as a brand or a visual identity. It doesn't hinder your creative process, it definitely enhances it, but you've done it in a really I guess, creative way, for lack of a better word. And yeah, it's always identifiable in what you're creating, but yeah, it's not like the hero of the piece. But I'll let you touch on that a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much nailed the question. I think, yeah, it's around what techniques you use and whether that's similar textures, colours, yeah, how you actually, the application of what you do. As Cass said, you're quite versatile, but talk us through that process of, you know, your own visual identity and style.
I always find this topic interesting because I think I've said it in the past that I obviously I don't set out to do things a certain way, but when I hear people say, "Oh, that," like people will message me or tag me and say, "Hey, is this one of yours? This looks like one of yours." And I like, it's always flattering, but it's always there's no clear answer as to why people think that. I'm obviously doing something that has established a style. But the more I think about it is there are various techniques that I use across everything I do, regardless of the kind of work I'm doing. So whether it's a static template with some numbers and whatnot, or a crazy caricature style, I'll always do certain things like add, like for instance, a noise layer, or add some posterization effects, or sort of like a vignette sort of shadow around the graphic to make certain things pop and things like that. I'd say there's sort of a set few things that have just become habit for me. It's almost like a filter that I apply over as like a final run.
It's like your spell check, I guess, of like what an editor would usually do. It's kind of like, yeah.
And actually, the other big one is the lighting technique I apply to some of the like characters and stuff. I just sort of have a standard kind of thing where I'll fill it with white, invert, and reduce by a certain width. And it's hard to explain, but it's just these things that you do. And I remember I met with the Brisbane Broncos last year and met with their fantastic young design team. And I just sort of sat through showing them what we're talking about here, a few of these steps and stuff. And it's because it honestly is second nature. It's stuff that I've done really quickly, but I was amazed to see like the light bulb go off in a couple of those guys' head as well as to what I was doing, because everyone has their own technique and their own style and things that they do all the time. But it's always fascinating to see someone else's take on it and how they approach that. And I remember seeing that when we were meeting with the Broncos guys, and conversely, they were doing things as well that I hadn't seen before. So there's that sort of sharing of information that was cool. But yeah, I'd say it really boils down to there's a set few things that I do, and I apply that quite a lot. And I guess that's sort of where my look comes from.
How important is it for a designer to have their own style and output, but also be quite versatile? Because a lot of designers love creating, and they'll try and create one piece of art and then they'll create another piece and they're just completely different. Whereas, you spread your wings across multiple pieces of digital designs, but it always comes back to that one technique or consistency.
I don't think there's a clear answer. I think it doesn't hurt either way. Like I said, I didn't set out to say I need to have a style and that's how I'm going to be successful in this game. It's like I just wanted to create certain things, and then over time, like I said, your style might develop. If anything, I'd say it's more important to be versatile, especially if you're starting out. You might not know exactly what you're the strongest at yet, or what you enjoy doing the most yet. So to be able to take a breadth of different content types and outputs and try a bunch of different things would be the way I'd recommend going. And then from there, either you'll determine which is your favorite, or the clients that you work for will determine which is the best, because that's what they keep hiring you for. And that's where you might start to maybe move towards a niche market or things like that. So I would suggest trying to be as versatile as possible from the get-go, unless you've started or entered this industry with a particular skill set. If you're a straight up illustrator from the get-go, then it might make sense to focus more on that if you're having success with that, rather than sort of neglecting it and trying all different things. But the way I've approached it is to try and be as versatile as possible. And I think I've just been fortunate to be someone that I guess has a style, if you'd call it that.
Yeah,
for sure.
I mean, I read an opinion the other day about when young designers are starting out and what route they want to go down with style and technique, and a lot of the suggestion was a lot of designers should actually try and mimic other designers' work just to get a feel for how they portray particular visual comms and ideas. And obviously it's only personal work, so you're not putting it out into the wild and basically copying and paste it, but just to try different techniques and see what comes naturally to you.
I would agree with that. I mean, I myself started off in a similar way. I mean, like I said, I come across someone's work. I thought, wow, that looks cool. I reckon I could try something like that. And yeah, for a client, I wouldn't say, Like if a client comes to me and says, we want you to create work that looks exactly like this, well, you'd say, well, have you tried contacting that person? And then failing that, then it's like, okay, well, how can I put my spin on it? But when you're starting out, and that's the same as anything, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. If you haven't if you look towards something that you're impressed by and you would like to try and do something like that, it's human nature to try and replicate that. So I think starting out, that's actually a benefit. That's a good way to go about things. It's more so that once you've figured that out and you move on to the next thing, that's when you start to piece things together, and that's where your own style, I guess, can start to develop.
Yeah. Did you start out and set out to be a designer within sport, or do you think that, or how did sport and design kind of come together for you as was it two passions that kind of aligned nicely once you got a few sporting gigs, or what was how did you get into sport basically from a design point of view?
I've always been a sports fan. Basketball has been my number one sport. Rugby league's been my number two sport. I mean, I grew up watching rugby league, but I'm a big skinny beanpole, so I wasn't built for that sport. But I've always played basketball and just been obsessed with that. Basically, when I started university and I was learning Photoshop, I put sport to the wayside. I stopped playing and it was really focused on that. But when the whole sports design thing came along, that was like I'm not a religious person, but I guess you'd call it like a come to Jesus moment, where I saw people I literally saw like Tyson Beck from Australia was working for the NBA. And so I saw this guy who is good at Photoshop, loves basketball, put those two things together. I felt like an idiot that how did I not make that connection? It took a friend of mine to say, hey, have you seen what this guy's doing? You could do that. And I was like, I reckon I probably could do that. So that's where the sport design came from. I'd been designing in Photoshop for years prior, creating, movie posters and fun things like that, things inspired by pop culture and whatnot. But the actual sport connection, for whatever reason, just didn't eventuate for me. So I feel a bit silly in retrospect because I probably could have made a go of it a lot earlier. But things happen at their own pace. So that's where the sport and design connection came for me.
Yeah, beautiful. What do you think are the key kind of contributors to your success within, I guess, design and now within sport? You're obviously someone that, you said that you looked to Tyson Beck as an influence. I'm pretty sure there's, hundreds of graphic designers now, they're looking to you as their inspiration, which is probably mind-blowing for you to think that, but it's absolutely true. So yeah, what do you think is your kind of key contributors to being successful? I guess that will in turn turn into advice for people who are trying to kind of follow your path.
Yeah, a bunch of things. I think being resilient and self-sufficient to a point. I mean, like I said, I was working as a freelance graphic designer since about 2008. So I didn't move into the sports realm until 2015. So that's like 7 years where I was basically working from home, there's no bigger motivator than having to pay the bills and put food on the table. Let's just get that out of the way. So that was the big one. So it was literally and even to this day, my cash flow goes ups and down. And a lot of the times I have to thank my wife for having the consistent income in our household. If she wasn't doing what she was doing, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing today. So she allowed me that flexibility to be able to chase what I want to do and not be completely sort of like hamstrung, I guess. I can enjoy the ups and downs and pursue those things. So I'd say the determination to just make a go of it. And, I've had countless times where clients haven't come through or just things haven't eventuated, but it's always on to the next one. So being resilient, positive frame of mind, and really just loving what you're doing. If you don't enjoy doing the sports design and experimenting in Photoshop and creating on a daily basis with different kinds of content and stuff, if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to keep doing it. And that's fair enough. I mean, that's sort of the proof is in the pudding. If you're going to keep at it, that's where things will come your way.
How hard are those early years of slogging it out as a freelancer, trying to get work, trying to, pay the bills? Because obviously there's so much competition, particularly now. There's so many young designers looking to work in sport, and there's, limited positions, limited opportunities. What advice do you have for those guys? Because everyone starts their journey and lands their dream job at different times. Day one for someone else might be day 50 or 100. So it's important to not panic and be frustrated with not landing a job in that first couple of years.
Absolutely. There's a lot of lessons to be learned there. And to be honest, I'm still learning every year in my career. And I've still had ups and downs. I'll still have months currently where it's like, where's my next job coming from? What am I going to do? Oh, crap. And then just like that, 6 jobs fall in your lap and you have to start turning clients down, and you're like, and then it's the flip side. It goes both ways. Yeah, in terms of when I first started out, I had there was one particular client. I did some work for a college football client, and at the time, I remember getting a brief come in, and it was like a 6 month job or something, because it was essentially like the college football season and the recruiting and everything that entails. And at the time when that came across my desk, I was desperate for work, and I was basically ready to jump on anything. And I remember seeing the quote was for like, it was about 15,000 US dollars, which at the time, even when you convert, I was like, my eyes lit up. I thought, oh my God, this is gonna sustain me forever. But then when you think 15,000 US dollars spread over 6 months work, and it was literally like nonstop 6 months work, you burn that up really quickly. And even to this day, that particular job was the most stress I've ever been under in my entire life. It pretty much broke me, and it was almost the end of my sports career. Like I was by the time I managed to get out of that, I was so relieved, and I vowed never to touch that again. And that's to me, that's a massive credit to those people that I see working in especially college sports over in the US. The grind there is absolutely unimaginable. So the people that manage to do that day in and day out, I take my hat off to you, because I remember that just being an absolute slog.
Yeah, definitely. There's plenty of those jobs out there in sport, low paying, high work rate jobs. We've all been there. But I'd love to kind of pivot now. I know there'll be people that will be watching this or listening to this that are really keen to kind of unpack the relationship that you have with the NBA and all of the kind of successes you've had there. But in order to kind of, to get on that path, one quick question around how important has it been for you to invest in your like social profiles and platforms and be kind of professional in the digital space? I know you use like, Instagram and LinkedIn a fair bit, but we heard from a designer previously that they spent, like had to challenge themselves to post one post every day for 100 days. That was kind of their vision to being successful on social, and hopefully that would translate in. So I'd love to hear your take on how social has played a role for you in lead generation and being able to kind of, obviously graphic design is a visual medium, social media is a visual platform. So how have you kind of married the two in order to kind of land the jobs? And then we'll kind of go into the NBA world after that.
Yeah, I can't overstate how important having a, I guess, impressive social media presence is. I'm probably not on top of it as much as I was back in the day, but I mean, there's a couple of factors here. Like if you're trying to prove to a potential client or an employee that you're good at and capable of what you're doing, if you can show that you're able to create unique content on a daily basis, which is super impressive, but even like, every couple of days, if you're putting up something new and fresh, that's proof in the pudding. That's showing that you're able to actually deliver. Because that's, once you're working in a real environment like that, particularly for a sports organization, content comes so fast and the requirements come so fast that once you hit the ground, you really need to be, hit the ground running. So I think that's a really good way to go about things. Once I got established, but most of my clients will still come to me through seeing my work elsewhere, word of mouth, and going to my social media and seeing it from there. I don't know whether I wouldn't consider mine to be the most professional. A lot of the times I still put up a bunch of stuff up there that's just me having a bit of a laugh, just playing around with a silly idea and putting it up there. I'll have a post that'll blow up and, might get 5,000-10,000 likes. And then something that just doesn't connect with people, but it entertains me, and it might get like, 100 likes or something. So I don't really curate my socials in that regard. But at the same time, I guess that's like a reflection of me. So, if you're trying to present to potential employees that you're legit, you're professional, then by all means, make sure your social media accounts match that vibe.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. A lot of younger guys are sort of, they're publishing and posting, cool work, but it's a lot of the same thing. It's like a player focused type graphic. Whereas, if you want to work in sport, you're pumping out team lists, you're pumping out membership, merchandise graphics, out of house advertising, billboards. It's such a wide variety of outputs that these designers need to do, but they're consistently only doing the one thing. I think that's something that these younger crew really need to consider when they're posting work, and show that they actually can work with type and fonts and
showing a point of difference,
that sort of stuff. Yeah,
showing a point of difference. Like you said, you'll scroll through and there's just so much stuff, and a lot of it's impressive, but a lot of times it all looks the same, and then you can't differentiate who created what because they look so similar. creating something or taking, tackling a particular real life scenario that others mightn't have done. Like you said, there might be some obscure billboard design or whatever it might be, but just something that people don't often see is a good way to try and make a name for yourself, I guess.
But do you think that might be because they're feeling kind of challenged by, like, maybe they're just sticking to their lane, they're sticking to what they know, they're trying to do a really good job at one thing without realizing, I guess, the impact that would have on someone like us or a client going to their page and being like, oh, you're kind of one lane approach. But there'd be design types, Lee, that you would have come across in your career journey as well that are probably not your favorite, not your most, like, you're not the best at them. It's not part of your like major skill set, but you've obviously had to pivot, learn, try and challenge yourself in those spaces. So maybe they're just kind of hamstrung a bit by their own skill set, and they're just scared to take a leap and jump into a new style. But how many times have you had those challenging briefs or challenging skill set challenges, I guess, that you've had to kind of overcome? And would you say that it's good for a designer to overcome them and learn something new, or should they stick to their lane? Like, what's the argument?
I think it's good to be challenged as a designer. I could be hypocritical here, but once I get myself into a position, I can sort of pick and choose a little bit more. I tend to avoid things that if I can just see that something's going to be a time commitment or something that's beyond what I feel like doing, I guess I'm in a position now where I can sort of move away from that. You're not always in that position. When you get started, you sort of take what you can get. But to be honest, from a design and taking pride in being a graphic designer, if you can actually take on a challenge, something you might not have done before, or it's a little bit out of your comfort zone, it's only going to improve you and your skills. And because design is really, problem solving, coming up with a solution to a communications problem, and finding, the best outcome for that. So I would suggest, taking that on, not shying away from it, but each to their own. It depends. It really depends on the specifics.
I think, one issue, or a lot of the younger crew are worried about the aesthetic of their Instagram feed. And, I've been guilty of it before, and how that looks and comes across, because, you don't necessarily want to be posting, a commercial report or commercial deck on your Instagram feed. So the versatility of your portfolio, whether you use another platform like Behance, where you can actually upload some of the more boring or LinkedIn, that sort of stuff. Yeah. I think there's always a place where, when it comes to Instagram, everyone's very worried about how they look visually, as opposed to what their actual skill set and output is. Yeah,
for sure. I've probably gone a little bit too far one way with that, where I sort of don't care anymore. I'll just post something up there, almost in like a self-sabotage way sometimes. Like you could scroll down my stuff and you'll see things from years ago. Like, dude, you should probably, what's that doing there? Like, not quite, I'm not quite cancel culture stuff, but you know what I mean? Like, I'm not too fussed about manicuring my presence anymore. Perhaps I should, but I don't know. I put myself up there. That's who I am, and that's how I go. But I understand where that comes from, especially when you're starting out and you're especially if you're looking to someone else and you go, oh my God, look at their page. That looks great. Maybe I should get rid of this thing. It's not quite up to my scratch. And as you're developing as a designer, it does make sense. Like, if you're trying to show and put your best foot forward, if you find that in 12 months time, work you did 12 months ago, you're really not happy with, and you don't think it's up to scratch, then by all means take that down and put up your newest stuff. But at the same time, I like to show my progression. Yeah,
I think that's definitely important. Speaking of progression, let's jump into the how did you get into the MBA? What was kind of the inroads in there, and how has that grown? And kind of what are you doing in there at the moment?
So with the MBA, there's sort of two elements to this. There's the MBA 2K side with the video game, and then there's the at MBA social media side. So with the social media at MBA thing, I think for me personally, that's a pretty good example of not burning bridges and just trying to be friendly online. So I did some work for them might have even been 2017 when I first signed like a contract with them. And I did the occasional birthday graphic and things like that. I wasn't doing a whole lot. Like, I might have worked for them for maybe 12 months and I might have done maybe 10 to 15 graphics in total. And it was fine. Everyone got on and stuff, but there wasn't enough work for me. And it just didn't quite eventuate into like a long-term gig. But then fast forward a number of years and sort of management turned over a few times and whatnot. And now there's sort of a new people in charge there. And a number of the guys and girls that are working there now, I've actually just met and become friends with on social media over the years. And we were all just basketball art fans. We were just posting art. And lo and behold, now these people who are just essentially mates of mine now help sort of running the stuff over there. And just being in touch with them, I just sort of expressed an interest to say, hey, I see you guys are often looking for full-time employees. Just letting you know that I'd love to help out there with some freelance stuff if the occasion called. And sure enough, they were sort of, oh, that sounds great. We didn't even realize you're interested in this kind of stuff. And I was like, are you kidding me? and so from there on, we've just again, it's sort of, I'm in a fortunate position where I could probably take on more work with them if I was able to. I just have a lot of other commitments at the moment, especially with NBA 2K. But yeah, that's sort of how we're going with the NBA guys and girls at the moment. It's really just just through having a presence and just not burning bridges, being friends with people online. You never know where that might head. So that's the at NBA socials. NBA 2K came about, and I've mentioned this before, but I pinch myself when I think about it. It was a weekend. I got an email one morning, and it was just it turned out to be the art director of NBA 2K, but he was a bit coy initially. He was basically, hey, look, we're looking at maybe getting some artwork for a game. Would you be interested? And so I responded and said, oh, can you provide a little bit more information? He goes, oh yeah, you may have heard of it. It's called NBA 2K. And I thought the whole thing was I thought I was being scammed or punked or something. I didn't know what was going on. But sure enough, I responded. And after a bit of back and forth, they basically, at the time, they wanted to create a bunch of murals for the 30 NBA teams. And at the time, he was trying to decide whether he wanted to have 30 different artists create one mural or one artist create 30 murals. And he was just sort of putting the feelers out there. And he asked what I thought of that. And I said, hey, I'll gladly take all 30 if that's something you're interested in.
I'll do them all.
I'll do them all. And yeah, so that's where that came from. And it was literally like, I'm pretty sure I did the backtracking and he found me on an old website called DeviantArt, which sounds dodgy, but it's an old art website where when I first started doing digital art back in the early 2000s, which was just random abstract crap, really. I just used to post it online. I've just been posting stuff there for years. And then when I started doing the social media stuff, social sports stuff, I'd put some stuff up there as well. And that particular website had really good search engine and optimization. So if you typed in NBA wallpapers, 9 times out of 10, you would get stuff on DeviantArt there. And quite often, for whatever reason, I had a few that used to pop up there. And I think that's how they found me. So just pure blind luck. And that was 2016, I think. So we're at 2023 now. And I'm currently working on 2K24. And it's just, I often say that it's just this wave that I'm riding, and eventually it's going to crash, like something, they'll need someone else or whatever. I'm just taking it for a ride while I have me. So
it's pretty awesome that they've maintained a relationship with you in a freelance capacity for that long as well. We see a lot of organizations use freelance for a period of time, realize how important it is and it's impactful to the business, and then hire someone full-time to kind of do that. So are you still working with 2K in a freelance capacity, or are you a full-time employee?
Still freelance. And I've been fortunate so basically the art director that originally contacted me still works there in sort of a larger capacity. And now I work with other art directors, and I've sort of been able to each year, I felt like it's good. I feel like I prove myself to belong again and again. And so it's almost like I'm a virus in a way, in that other departments within the organization will start to get me to do different work. So not only is it just murals now, I can do work on the user interface and different graphics and things that sort of help there. And then someone else in the department will say, hey, can we get him to try this and this and that? So it's been great in that regard. So, and I often talk about my sort of imposter syndrome, in the sense that, being a designer, you always feel like you're trying to prove yourself. And when success comes your way, you start to, do I deserve this? Am I for real with this kind of stuff? So rather than let that sort of mess me up, that's always become like a challenge for me to each year I need to show that I belong. And that sort of helps you raise the bar and make sure you belong, I guess.
How many designers do you work and collaborate with other designers? Because I assume there's probably a few others that work on NBA 2K. How does that process sort of come to fruition?
there's a handful of different designers working in all kinds of different elements there. So I tend to work more in a bubble where my specific art director will say, hey, look, we need a mural for this particular thing. Can you come to us with some concepts for that? And then for the user interface stuff, they'll be like, hey, look, this is the menu system we're designing this year. We'd really like to have a picture of such and such here. Can you try some styles there? And sometimes I have a real specific set of requirements, and other times it's like, hey, look, here's a blank slate, go for it, see what you can do. So that's my relationship with them. But again, I'm working on such a small element of the game. You've got artists working on 3D environments, working on menu systems, working on all kinds of different things. So specific graffiti artists creating logos for different teams. I'm one of an absolute handful of full-time employees, and then freelancers. I'm one of the freelancers. So yeah.
Geez, I'd love to know the budget for that.
A specific graffiti artist, like that is absolutely crazy. How have you, working with Australian sports teams and organisations, and then working with kind of NBA and the powerhouses over in the US, is there an obvious discrepancy in the way that they invest in content or treat content? Like, I feel like you talk to people in the NBA and they've got teams of 10, 12 just in design and just in and you come to Australia and there's like one or two required to do the same kind of output, and they're both going onto the digital platforms and they're being compared, but obviously resourcing and things are so different. But like, what's your experience? Because obviously you would work with like creative directors and art directors, as you're mentioning. Is there a major difference between working with them
if you take that example I was speaking of earlier about the college sports system, if you take that out of the equation, then yes, there's a massive difference. My work with the NBA, NBA 2K, is just thinking these big organizations with so many employees and so many sort of check marks and things that need to be ticked before something even gets published. Where a lot of my dealings, and the Australian side is actually getting bigger as people become more aware of how important social media is for sports and promotion and things like that. So it is improving, but it's just night and day in terms of the scale of these companies. And that's not taking shots at Australian sport. That's just a fact of, like, you look at the NRL, which is a big probably billion, I don't know, it's a big company, but it's not the NBA. That's just a fact. So I think, and in terms of the social media side of things, yeah, their teams aren't anywhere near the size, but that's through no fault of anyone's. This is a burgeoning sort of thing that's building, and people are learning along the way, and they are getting bigger. So there is a clear difference, but I guess that's to be expected, as I'm sure you guys are aware.
Yeah, I think the audience, obviously, of an NBA team or the NBA organisation obviously is not even comparable to what domestic sports are like. So that definitely makes sense that they're never going to be able to be replicated in that sense. But I think just the approach and the mentality around content as well is what I feel like is different. So yeah, they're not going to have 10 people in their team potentially, but there's still a barrier between levels of management and decision makers about the importance of content and being able to, put an ROI against it. We talk about it all the time. It's probably something we need a whole another episode on. But yeah, I just feel like that there's a discrepancy there in just the mentality around content and the importance of it.
Absolutely. The one thing I would say, though, if you wanted to compare and say where there's been a line you could put through both, that's an example of success, is basically when you have someone that's like a creative manager that allows the creative team to do what they think will work and doesn't let the sort of middle management come down and hinder that. That's where you get a success, regardless whether it's Australian or American sport. And that's the success I had with the NRL, and that's the success I've had with these American organizations, is that you guys sort of let the designers sort of drive a lot of that kind of stuff and not let middle management come in and sort of, kill creativity.
Yeah, it's a great point.
Yeah, it's so important, like who the CEO is or the decision maker, that they actually understand the value and importance of good creative. And they might not have any idea, but if they understand that it's valuable and there's an ROI, then it helps the business a lot.
Absolutely. And that doesn't just apply to sport, right? And design. Right. That applies to anything. Like if looking at basketball, if you're running a basketball team, usually the owners that don't delegate and don't let the coach do his job and let the marketing people do their job, as soon as they come down and start putting their fingers in everything, that's generally the organizations that don't do as well. that's just how, that's just life.
Yeah, so it's so important. I've never actually thought about it in terms of the structural, like, makeup of how that can, definitely filter down and make sure that the creative process isn't hindered at all. Look, one of the areas that we kind of look into as well as in the sport design space is working directly with athletes, and there's rules and regulations around how that happens in every sport. But I guess I'd love to hear your experience. Obviously, you've worked with some really high-profile athletes, but I'd love to hear what your general thinking is around working and well, maybe I'll rephrase it. Athletes who are probably working, who are in teams and leagues and other organisations themselves, are probably relying on those teams and graphic designers in there to kind of help elevate their own social profiles. They're probably not investing in a specific designer to help them on their own channel. So they're kind of hindered by what they're able to get access to inside their clubs. We think it's important that they're obviously investing in their own growth on social and their own content. We don't see that a lot in Australia where players are kind of working with designers or agencies to do that. But obviously you've had experience where you've had athletes and high profile talent work directly with you in order to bring to life commissioned work. So I'd love to hear, I guess, your take on that and how that's been successful for you.
My take on that is I haven't, most of the stuff that sort of falls in that regard has literally been athletes finding my work on social media. Either I've posted it and tagged them and it's come across their desk, or, I mean, the biggest example was obviously the artwork that I did that came across Shaquille O'Neal's desk. And that was, I don't know exactly whether he found that, or that could have been, his kid found it and sent it to him, or someone else. That's just how it comes about. So it's not, I haven't had direct relationships with athletes in a professional sense. It's all come from like an organic social media side. So that's again an example of just putting your work out there and never knowing what comes from it. So I've created artwork. I did artwork for he was with the Lakers a number of years ago, Alex Caruso. At the time, his girlfriend hit me up to create I think it was a Christmas present. It was basically just like a portrait of him, and I'd sent it off to him. And then by the time I think he received it, he got traded to the Chicago Bulls. So this, like, what I thought was a pretty cool artwork, obviously wouldn't have meant as much to him anymore because he's just gone to a new team. But yeah, most of the stuff that I've done has been, just athletes finding me that way. So that's not to say I wouldn't like to work directly with athletes in an official capacity in the future. That's definitely something that I'd be open to. But yeah, I guess, I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it's for sure. I think it's just important as a growth area for either us as a business and for athletes themselves is to think about how design and content can play a role for them directly as individual athletes, as opposed to them as a member of
I can see definitely in Australia that a lot of these athletes are becoming more aware of this and seeing it something that's of benefit to them. And I've actually seen a number of young sports designers within our country do really well teaming up with athletes and a variety of different partnerships. Like I've seen like clothing labels spring up out of nowhere and things like that. And so a lot of these local athletes are creating a brand around themselves, which is what you see happen a lot in the US. So there is avenues there for young designers to team up with athletes outside of sporting organizations, which is an interesting and sort of organic way to see things progress.
Yeah, for sure.
Probably depends on IP, I guess, for each of the leagues and what they can and can't do with CBA agreements and all that sort of thing.
Oh, there is that element, of course. And I have seen people that have completely disregarded that, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah, whole nother piece.
Whole nother episode, I think, that one.
Oh gosh, let's not even get into it. I don't think. Look, we don't have much time left, Lee, but I just maybe just like to kind of chat to you about what is next on your radar in terms of growth and development and in the design space. Like, you're obviously doing an amazing job. We love your work. Everyone loves your work. But, the design industry and landscape's changing. So there's, introductions of AI and those types of technologies as well. So how much time are you spending investing in educating yourself on that to be ready for when that potentially becomes a whole bigger issue? Or how much time are you kind of spending not looking at it and trying to focus on what you're doing already?
Not as much time as I should be investing in it. I had a quick little dabble with some of the AI generated stuff a couple of months ago. And just the way it's progressed so quickly is terrifying. I still haven't updated to the latest version of Photoshop that has the whiz-bang content fill and a bunch of these new features.
Great.
Not because I'm scared of it. It's normally, I usually just wait 12 months before I update Photoshop, and just generally speaking. And I know as soon as I do update, I'll be making use of some of those things there as well. So it is a little bit scary where that's headed, but as a lot of, I think we're coming to a realization that that's not going anywhere. We can't make it stop. So it's either how can you find a way to leverage it to help you do what you do and speed things up without losing your sort of authentic, artistic integrity, or do you just get left by the wayside? So there will be a moment where like I'll have to really cross that bridge because, either it'll be that the decision will be taken out of my hands or I will have some time to do that. But for the time being, I'm continuing to just keep working on what I'm doing with NBA 2K. Hopefully once that's sort of a little bit more in control, I'll be back doing some stuff with the NBA guys, and then just trying to continue to do things for myself that I enjoy doing, and, potentially create sort of, I'd love to be in a position where I could create artwork for artists or whatever it might be, or teaming up with some kind of organization to take care of that IP kind of stuff, and, create merchandise or things with an official capacity that people could get into entertainment out of. Because even to this day, the amount of people that hit me up privately on social media and say, hey, look, we love this post you did. Can I get this for my son's bedroom or for this or for that? And it's like, oh, mate, I'd love to be able to do these things, but there's no official way to do this kind of stuff. I feel like there's so many untapped markets there for, especially in Australia, to really make some pretty cool products that could both promote sport and, just get things going, get kids happy and healthy and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, for sure.
Interesting.
Love it. Any last words or questions for Lee?
No, it's been a good chat actually.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll have a part 2 soon, but yeah, really appreciate you coming on to the podcast.
Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, obviously, and for all the work you do in sport design generally, you're an awesome part of the industry, but you're also, super integral to the work that we do. And we've just loved having you on board for the ride. So we'll be in touch again soon.
Very kind. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, Lee.
Thanks, Lee. Bye-bye.
See ya.